In the villa of our men, in the villa of our men, stands a solitary candle. In the center of it all, in the center of it all, you are.
Maybe he thought I wanted I meant the less expensive brand of don't violate my privacy act, which means if Luke has a residency and and he has his chemist's own investment shares, and he's got the handshake with Arrow and the handshake with Alpha Farm, and maybe I needed a less expensive brand of that 3-bedroom house to myself that I had at Downer, and maybe that's the only language he learned to talk after securing all those bulk buy discounts from these generic brand companies, and so they could talk about me and this deal. But I made this deal with Luke. We had a discussion outside of Hughes. I accosted him about absolutely nothing that had any bearing whatsoever on his work, his career experience. Meanwhile, there were issues about his work and career experience that he would learn I was aware of, but yet that I didn't care to talk to him about it with, because private sector. Don't you know, people, that if you're in a private sector company, then you're not part of you're above the rights. You're above the rights charter. The private sector is amazing that way. Apparently, I was watching a documentary yesterday afternoon at my neighbor Tim's, talking about how the Nazis were doing these experiments where, as they viewed the Jews to be extinct, a race pending extinction, they were taking certain captured Jewish people, killing them, and then removing their skulls to be confiscated and held for further scientific study, because they thought they could work out certain objective truths about the Jewish physique by studying the bone structure of the skull. They wanted to make sure that they purged the world of the Jewish race. But yeah, I think if I did have a generic brand of a residency, they're hard to negotiate here in Canberra. You can get a housing govy flat, but even that's not good enough, because that's government still. So that's like Federal Rights, Human Rights Act. So Roger would want to know if I had the less expensive brand of that. Which means he'd have to probably sell the generic brand, the less expensive brand of the residency to housing, and then housing dispense the residency to me, and then but even then I would say, well, look, now that I've got the less expensive brand of a residency, it's only become twice as important to me, given that I've noticed this pred element. There was the ped way you talked, when you talked about me. I didn't really have a relationship with my father so much beyond the ages of like 5 or 6. So his statement, you were sexually embarrassed by your father, and now, defenders of Roger and his credibility, I think it's called. I know knows the word credit because part of the deals he had with these generic brand companies, they could often owe him credit stock and credits from discounts for bulk purchases of generic brand stock. And so I know he understands the word credit, but it's more in a Visa. It's more in like a MasterCard Visa kind of way, not in a like, oh, you mean I have credit? Like, he wouldn't be saying it that way. He'd be like, give me more fucking credit. Like, well, what? But between me and this arrangement that we made, gonna cost me my address. That like, I can have a phone conversation with you. You can, we can talk through conventional means respectfully. But, contacting me saying things like, I can see everything you do. And, they have this talk throughout depends which pharmacist you speak with, because they know, even amongst management pharmacists. So I think, it was harsh they picked on me because I was taught about things that were an element of the career that of the pharmacist's career that a number of pharmacists either did not know about or were too offended by to not want an interest in it. And they're the sort of pharmacists who will say, you've done your job right if they don't come back to your pharmacy because they're healthy now. Versus Elizabeth Breton, I love it when more people get on the Mental Health Act. She would say. This whole like, oh, let's contact him at home. Oh, I can see everything you do. You don't have a job with us anymore. Oh, and you're sick. Oh, and you're sick and you have a dexamphetamine script. I swear, fucking Christ, the National Health Scheme wasn't made with me in mind. I should have, because of, what I was taught about Schedule 8 policy, it pretty much, you almost want, like, drugs with 7 times the intensity of what you were getting. And no talk about the bureaucracy affiliated with, the policies surrounding drugs of the Schedule 8 class. They talked about it's interesting though, because even that Deformation magazine that would go out to chemists often had articles written seriously about the Willy Wonka that Willy Wonka element of the pharmacist who dabbles in his own supplies, because he doesn't exist. Willy Wonka really exists, but not pharmacists that would ever sample a single medication or item in their store whatsoever under any circumstances. So absurdly, Deformation magazine, which I think is a magazine made just for pharmacists and pharmacy stuff, pretty much had a focal topic talking about be careful with sampling your own stock. Maybe it was about thrush cream. I don't know. No, I do know, because it was about like substances that could. I started to talk up the more Schedule 8, quote dangerous unquote drug category of drugs, because there's a stereotype with the word drug in the first place that anyone who ever uses one is an addict, and there's another stereotype that because speed and meth and ecstasy and MDMA liquid and GHB and all these, pre-2010 substances that I would be fortunate enough to encounter from time to time. They are what people, I think, mean by, these are the substances that are, even though they're called Schedule 8, I mean, that morphine fly spray is classed as a Schedule 5, just in case you didn't know that. Your Panadol and your aspirin is Schedule 2. It's It's not, it was originally called pharmacy only medicine. I don't know, does that mean that then aspirin and paracetamol are now not even Schedule 2, or have they changed the technical definition of Schedule 2? But it used to be that Panadine containing 8 milligram codeine was Schedule 2, and that means you can buy the medicine in a pharmacy, but a member of staff, any member of staff, could pretty much sell you that medicine in that pharmacy. And then there was Schedule 3, which it means pharmacist only, which means that though you can buy that medicine in a pharmacy, it's not right that it be sold to you without a direct intervention by the pharmacist to talk to you about that medicine. Schedule 4 means prescription only, so that medicine will be in a pharmacy, but you cannot get it without a doctor's prescription. Pharmacy staff really won't give you any advice about Schedule 4 medicines unless they are repeating verbatim what a pharmacist has asked them to say to you. But when I did my tech course, they talked about all these other schedulings, like including Schedule 5, and I'd never, until this course, heard of Schedule 5, but it refers to like a bunch of insecticides and like 24-hour morphine, fucking flea bomb, poison, all these other poisons, and then Schedule 8, which is the dangerous drugs kept in the safe. And but that's the way I've seen how street drug dealers get annoyed and talk about who they've kicked, who's on tick, so they owe them for like an ecstasy pill here, this and that and the other there, and it would just be I almost feel like saying because these are pharmacy drugs and they're not like dexamphetamine is not speed. Actually, in the years prior to my career, the era of my career, there was a formula of cold and flu, day and night cold and flu, that contained paracetamol, codeine, and ephedrine sulfate, I think it was called, or ephedrine hydrochloride. Sorry, and but ephedrine was deemed to have side effects that were too, they were on the fringe of being a euphoric antagonist. So, the manufacturers of these substances, that's actually why pseudoephedrine, which now to us at our age, in our generation, is pseudoephedrine now is the controversial one. And they've tried to purge that out of your cold and flu and your Dimetap pills. So, now if you've got nasal congestion, so it used to be, if you want you have nasal congestion, well, ephedrine works really well, but now they're saying it's too euphoric. So try the new pseudoephedrine. Pseudo means like false or fake. So pseudoephedrine literally means fake ephedrine. But then before too long, it's enough controversy about that. So they moved from ephedrine to pseudoephedrine, and now it's to phenylephrine, which it feels like a total rot because it's the same damn phenylephrine as what they put in the purple Dimetap syrups that you had as a kid for a little stuffy nose before your sinuses could grow big enough to actually get blocked. I know there are various considerations and concerns that they're having, like apparently with certain chemical treatment procedures, a pseudoephedrine can be turned into some form of amphetamine. I've seen this done. I know Breaking Bad is the closest I've come to seeing this all being done. But apparently, just if in the old days, if you got a cold and flu preparation that contained ephedrine, so it is a bit like fashion in a way, where these trends and changes. But what I would pay attention to is making these other agents that claim to have an equivalent clinical like pharmacotherapeutic effect, having completely subtracted any potential for any euphoric state of consciousness, can be achieved without compromising the pharmacotherapeutic value. Or is it just reminds me of how I would feel with art that I like and the censorship police, who would be in, if it was instead of going from ephedrine to pseudoephedrine, to phenylephrine, you've got Davy Jones to Elvis to Marilyn Manson, because it's just too much if that Elvis guy is strumming his guitar on stage, rotating his hips, that had everyone squealing, was quite disturbing. And then, Manson with a dancer on stage, and he's got a microphone in her ass so he can sing "Sweet Dreams Are Made of These" out of the sphincter-mounted microphone, and it's just it's really like, oh, it's a bad year in fashion this year, But these are substances for health. I don't know. I'm not sure what the drama is. This ephedrine is clearly way too euphoric. I bet it was way better at like opening up the like. I remember reading the notes about pseudoephedrine is an orally effective nasal decongestant with peripheral effects similar to that of epinephrine and central effects similar, but less intense than amphetamines. It is a sympathomimetic agent, meaning that it creates an effect similar to that which results from the stimulation of the sympathetic nervous system. Pseudoephedrine does elevate blood pressure. However, at the recommended dose, it should induce little to no press effect in normotensive patients, which is to say that unless you already have high blood pressure and hypertensive, if you're normotensive, then the slight increase to your blood pressure while under the influence will not be enough to put you at risk if you're already normotensive. But I just think, particularly with this, now they call it Sudafed PE, which is like the Sudafed phenylephrine edition, which is like, it's like if they made like Street Fighter 2 and then Street Fighter 2 Turbo Edition and then Street Fighter 2.5 No Arms or Legs Edition. So you have just an upper torso with a head on each character, each fighter in Street Fighter. But there are Christian lobbyists saying, at our church we say that seeing is believing and that God teaches and speaks to us through things. So what's God speaking to the children of God through this game, Street Fighter 2 and Street Fighter 2 Turbo? We need to do something about that. So they write to the Therapeutics Goods Administration and the Therapeutics Gods Administration and the Theological God fucking ass party ass parade, and out comes Street Fighter 2.5, prosthetics, no prosthetics edition. And so there's no more kicking and punching anymore because they got Ryu and Ken, and Guile and Honda and fucking M. Bison and all these Street Fighter 2 characters, but they just removed both their left and right arms and their left and right legs. So no kicking anymore. That'll keep girls that love Christian media happy. Because that's the thing in Street Fighter 2 is that you can't turn the other cheek like they say in the Bible. So if you punch someone or use an uppercut in Street Fighter 2, the person just had to take it on the jaw, recover, and try and fight back. But with the new Street Fighter 2.5 limbless torso edition, they still have special moves because everyone's special at heart in God's eyes. So you may not see that they are swinging their arms or kicking their legs or fighting at all. In fact, you might ask, why is it still called Street Fighter? But as Christian reviewers for these games will point out themselves, it's more Street Fighter than any other game before, because then they'll point to that scripture in Hebrews about taking up the shield of faith and the sword of the Spirit, which is the mighty word of God. So, if a Bible can be a sword, then you can play Street Fighter 2 and just with characters that just have an upper torso and a head. It's a question of what's appropriate as successive generations pass. And so with the influence of the religious right, you have this influencing pharmacy and industries like that. And, you've got rock music, which has been really true to the perennial experiment of the relevance of art and changes in artistic themes as art evolves. And then you've got, otherwise it'd be a bit backwards. Like it'd be like what pharmacy you're doing now. It would be like them having it'd be like I mean, that's the only argument I can think of. What is euphoria? Like, I doubt if I had one of those old cold and flu epinephrine pills, I doubt it would be like going to Big Day Out one year or to a music festival with it's like, I got cold and flu medication from a pharmacy circa 1982. And they're all like, what? You couldn't even get some Sudafed? No, this is better. This is from 1982. Oh. And what do you mean Sudafed? We were just making a joke to pay you out about that with Sudafed, because we actually have actual MDMA capsules here. We have MDMA liquid. We have Coke. We have, these are the sorts of things I would expect at a music festival. But, the way a lot of substances are talked about in pharmacy culture, like they are contraband, not that they're medicines that you hate being on, and if a pharmacy job that you're not on good terms with at all with the owners, they're your two worst enemies on earth. So you'd rather not even enter a pharmacy. Before getting my pain assessed, I waited. I didn't want to go on Centrelink either, so I sold almost all of my hard copy CDs. I sold all my Nintendo consoles, so the Super Nintendo that I've had since the 90s, early 90s, the Nintendo 64, all cartridges, game cartridges for the Super Nintendo, all game cartridges for the Nintendo 64, all controllers for both consoles, the Nintendo GameCube, I sold that too, and all the controllers for that. I didn't want to sign up with Centrelink, and so I sold as well all my paperback my library of philosophy books and paperback books that I owned, and I sold all of that too. And that was all because I did not like the feeling of being on a taxpayer's money, and also I didn't want a doctor referring me to a pharmacy. I probably should have, gone, oh yeah, you could just go to find one that hate capital chemists too, and then go to that one. But I just wanted to be as far away from any pharmacy as possible. So I waited and then saw a couple of years of the pain getting more severe and untreated, and you're into that Marquis de Sade, and like, I like pain. Pain's awesome. But I think that there's a real element of moderation there in statements like that, because it's like the difference between what I was saying the other day about like a mild, or not even mild, but just scarcely visible cosmetics cut on like across your chest. It's not you trying to slash your chest. You're not trying to leave yourself with a permanent scarring on your chest. It hurts about as much as like getting a wax strip ripping hairs off your body. So you're plus with physically, what they're calling it now, physically disabling pain. I found at certain moments in this that it's not abusing the therapeutic need sought out in purported to be getting met by with the therapies that I am on. And anyway, so I eventually get these Botox injections that celebrities get in their lips, and I get them all throughout my head, like over my scalp, because this neuro doctor had said he specializes in like neuropathic pain or some sort of a doctor in Deacon, and I saw him for like 10 months. I didn't want to be paying taxpayers' money, so I sold almost everything just to avoid being in the way that, when you're in the workforce and you listen to the way people on taxpayers' money are getting talked about, you'd want to have a leg blown off from being in the Vietnam War, so that no one's going to, give you a hard time for settling. But it's interesting though, if that attitude too comes out of private sector, and you're like, well, compared to government jobs, you actually lack a lot of professionalism when it comes to like philosophies of how you would care for your staff. For instance, if you would give a death threat to your staff, or if you would have occupational health and superstitious Freemason occupational health and occupational health and substance occupational health and soul-saving Freemason pseudo-psych profiles. No, wait, occupational health and semi-conscious employers, occupational health and sensibility. Right, that's Jane Austen. That was Jane Austen. That was Gary Cairns' Jane Austen story there. Occupational health and sensibility. Rogers was Bribe and Prejudice. And Mr. Darcy was they came out of the 16th century Freemason church and introduced Mr. Darcy into what's called a double teaming. which is where, yeah, as I said, the Freemason Church goes back as far as the 16th century, but the Masonic double team, which isn't really gay at all because, Lucifer's more powerful than that sort of name calling. But essentially, they would travel to the Victorian sort of Mr. Dart and Roger Toll and Gary Cairns would have their Masonic Freemason wear on and tag team Mr. Darcy, one in the mouth and one at the back from the rear. I'm not sure who goes for what, and I don't like that level of information from Roger and Gary. I would say back to him, what you do in your own time is your own business, but because I know you'd never accost me at my residency, fresh in the decade at my former residency in Downer, you would never do such a thing. No, of course not. Of course not. So anyway, so it's been an intensive morning of introspective thinking. But yeah, it so was not a sell everything you have and give the money to the poor. It's for me to buy food, and sign up with Centrelink. I could feel myself getting sicker and sicker gradually. Did not want to be dealing with healthcare or anyone. Eventually bit the bullet, and then Centrelink at the Centrelink office in Fells, they said I was a fucking idiot to sell some of my most sentimental, childhood items. And I was like, oh, yeah, it's a bit like getting my childhood raped in a way. Oh no, hang on, that's what Roger and Gary do when you're at work. Oh, no wonder I got so confused. Oh, we know what your worst moments come from. Genes. Genes caused it all. Couple of false accosting tosses. Get some integrity. Like you're not going to unify and harmonize your religious nuttery with your occupational health and speed principles. Sorry, occupational health and brand substitution. Occupational health. Occupational health and saline. Occupational health. I can't work that fucking. I can remember that initialism. But by Joe, I will remember before the day is done. All right, I'm out of here. Happy morning. The phenomenon of capital chemist stores to the present day having Eden Monaro Cancer Support Group collection jar tins on the counters of certain pharmacy stores, it would be equivalent to if the remaining staff at the former offices of Cardinal George Pell in the Catholic Church took photos of grade 2 to grade 3 or to 4 primary school boys and girls bending over with their asses pointed at the camera saying, "Don't let them make me turn the other cheek," or "I want a holy future," with captions like that. That would be the equivalent, I think, morally, of why the owners of Capital Chemists have the Eden Monaro Cancer Support Group collection jars out now. It would be like, same sort of deal. Because why should the whole Catholic Church's reputation be smeared just because of Cardinal George Pell and those sorts of arguments? But that's not what you think about when you think about how premeditated offences are by the aggressors. the best thing about Roger Toll's presence is enjoying the complete absence of it, the complete and total absence of his presence in every possible way. You know, some significant points of recovery in health occurred at nature's interesting. You know, the diametrically opposed opposite amount of the diametric opposite amount of time proportionate to the years that I invested working in his franchise, I think now has passed in terms of days, the day count. If you go like around Feb of 2001, then, you know, I'm safe. I'm home, back home from like, what, well, still in January, I think, 2010. It should be by now. Yeah. Anyway. The absence of Roger. Wonderful thing. So you live and you meet different people from different walks of life, and you see relativism and diversity in value. You see relativism and diversity in language. You must ask yourself, why did the Rights Charter and the Constitution get formed in the first place? What's our equivalent of like the founding fathers in the States and what they went through, and why the Constitution is what it is? Because I was very deterred from the idea of, again, this, you know, it's just it's getting old, done to death. Expressing what my childhood was like and calling other people's attention to it should have been up to me, not other people and their assumptions and their fucking nosiness and their, like, you know, if it's that sensitive and controversial and extreme a moment, a time period from my life, why do conversations not begin with inquisitive, an inquisitive side to another person's, you know, like, you know, I'll never forget Mrs. Triggerlone in kindergarten after I'd returned to school in late '89, and I had a little address book with my friends' phone numbers in them, and I was getting my friends to write their phone numbers down in the book for me. I was passing it around the class, collecting numbers, and Miss Triggerlone saw me, and she pretended to be real mean and confiscate the book. I didn't know how mean. I wasn't sure at the time. I thought, oh, I fucked up. But then at the end of class, she gave me back the address, the phone number booklet, and it had Mrs. Triggerlone added. And she was really nice. Friends, for the most part, were great. But I hate the after this, therefore because of this. Like, they might as well say everything, every aspect of my behavior and psychology is to be correlated to 1989 in some respects. That's what I call it. You know, my life getting illegitimately sold, trafficked, or ripped off. You know, and this Capital Group were the worst management at the Capital Group. Well, yeah. I consider Roger Toll to be more reprehensibly articulated than, men like my father, more offensive than my father. Um, yes, the problem with this post hoc ergo propter hoc Latin fallacy is that you could say you can just pick a moment from anyone's life and then say, well, any aspect of their behavioral psychology now can be, all you have to do. It's almost like taking some of the artist's means, but completely stripped of any ethical principles, because you're just going, well, you know, today Luke's wearing Adidas sneakers, which is clearly related to conflicts from 1989, because it's as if every step he takes, he's trying to walk away from, disturbing moments in his childhood. Luke ate some Danish feta cheese yesterday, which is psychologically linked through from conflicts to 1989, because a lot of the ways that he get picked on by people like his church leaders, they're giving them, were he to give them the most benefit of the doubt, their attempts at humor were always very cheesy. So that's why he was eating Danish feta cheese. Luke's sitting by his widescreen TV holding a remote, which is clearly ties into childhood conflicts from 1989, because he was taught to pray to God at that time, and that God would, show his love by controlling the events in his life, in much the same way that Luke operates the remote control by the TV. So clearly, every time I use a remote control, that's also a direct link to conflicts from 1989. What else? You could make anything like. So it's summarized more in a more modern sense. People like Penn Jillette, the magician, who's also a non-theist activist, says correlation doesn't prove causation. That's a more shorthanded way that Latin fallacy is expressed in modernity. After this, therefore, because of this, is wrong, and so correlation doesn't prove causation. Yeah, farting by the street lamps outside at 6:01, and the lights go out at 6:02 doesn't mean that. It means the event's correlated in time, but my farting wouldn't have turned off those two lights. So that was the part with management. I mean, they had to have known. I genuinely didn't like their company. I'd grown content with not winning over their approval in a professional context, because I was still waiting to see the professionalism in their greeting manner during conversations at work. So those never came about. And it's not that I didn't know about such professionalism. There's a lot of professionalism ethics go into things like Rock of Stedford. When I participated in Rock of Stedford, and there were only four. One of the dudes, one of an old school acquaintance, Zoran, went on to appear in Big Brother, the show. But I remember that year we were there are only four of us boys in the whole production. But there's that. There's peer support in year 10. There's youth leadership training in the youth group. To say I quit to say I deconverted and stopped being a Christian. A Christian, I've tried to iron out a perfectly refined definition. I think typically it involves the belief in a creating omnimax God who's all-knowing, all-powerful, and all-loving. The belief that Jesus was the incarnation of that God or the Son of that God. That the Bible is the infallible word of that God, and that after his crucifixion, Jesus rose from the dead and ascended to heaven. I think if you don't believe in all four of those propositions, then you wouldn't be considered a Christian. Though that is debated amongst the liberals, who will say, ask questions like, does the little red hen puzzle, does God have to even exist for these morals and teachings to be meaningful? So I'm not saying the Bible is devoid of any sort of meaningful teachings or ideas. I'm just saying it was destroying that ideal of, this is the perfect word of God, or you're much better off reading it as a history book and going, well, people actually believed in those days that, neighbors would get into fights because rain wouldn't fall on crops and they'd expire because there were pagan, witchy-like beliefs at the neighboring plot of land. And likewise, the definition of theism could be redefined, not just to say that it's the belief in supernatural God or gods, but it should just say the supernatural, because then that would encompass. Some people believe that there will be an afterlife, even though there's no God who exists. So I would still say that they are believers in the supernatural. An afterlife is a theistic idea. So I think that's definitely one way to refine the definition of theism. They could either shorten it and say a theist is a person who believes in the supernatural, or a theist is a person who believes in a supernatural God or gods or a supernatural dimension. And then that definition would be hardcore refined. But yeah, so, the sort of humility and inspiration you get from being a fan of bands like Korn and Manson, what you learn from these qualifications I had previously mentioned, they all factor into why you wind up having decent people skills. And yeah, it's just it's real. It's not your business to pry into the nitty gritty of why Roger's a corrections invested researcher and an investigator and stuff like that. But it's at the same time scary for him to, let me think. If I was in his position, I'd be. So suppose I was him and I was wanting to guard the claim that my researching methods are very precise and credible. Then if he had inquired into my life and came to the conclusion that I was a homosexual, what I would do if I was him would be to observe me in social settings at events, observe or ask me about my romantic life. And then there would be ways to find out discreetly if your researching efforts had corresponded with reality without coming forward and yeah, I mean there'd be ways to corroborate what he thought his findings were without having to violate the Sex Discrimination Act. But yeah, Christians talk about being prepared to die for their beliefs, and I'm not in that party. It's just I'd like to be persecuted for what I am, and not persecuted because of a very egomaniacal, tyrannical, self-absorbed person's straw man fallacy. Yeah, so not wanting. I mean, I had to educate myself after my nan died. I had one stepsister who I knew was into law. I had studied these Cluedo mystery books as a young kid, and after leaving the church and discovering philosophy, there was this boom of me really enjoying educating myself. I still initially felt too shy potentially for philosophy course, like the course at Gorman House. But yeah, I hated the idea of special treatment because, I mean, my mother would confuse me a lot at how, her attack is this obvious tragedy, but she can't tell me why it wasn't her God's will, why her God didn't plan or intend it for her, which is a horrible thought, and you can see why one reason why religion became quite offensive to me at quite a young age. So not wanting special treatment, and then dedicating time and effort in my private life to educating myself further on philosophy. I did not want any sort of special treatment, certainly not from these capital chemist managers. I just wanted the basic rights charter observed. That's all. Like, and especially, it would be so simple. Like, if just who wants to go home thinking about their boss who's violating the Sex Discrimination Act and insulting them during work hours, not comprehending to himself that what he said was actually really indecent, but instead leaving me to comprehend that he has some role in corrections, but that he thinks he can talk like that. I would be thinking, wow, I built this company, I'd be wanting to take so much care of it, like care not to make a cunt of myself in front of staff. Yeah, it's really, really disgusting. So I didn't want special treatment, I just wanted the basic rights observed because they're basic manners. any of them would hate it if I was prank calling them, breaking their privacy. And what happens is, I've generally experienced this. You can, with integrity, relentlessly observe the rights of others, stand up for the rights of others, not be a hero, not in the sense that, you know. I'd like to know more about Roger's. I know he has it in for so-called heroes, and I've always avoided the term. I don't like the church's agenda in thinking it's sort of more or less chosen to save the world. The ones wanting to save the world can wind up being the most detached from even getting to enjoy life on a moment-to-moment basis and appreciating every moment. And they can do damage along the way. The road to hell paved with good intentions. So I didn't want special treatment, but I just wanted I wanted an explanation why it wasn't occurring to Roger's common sense to go, especially someone who founded a private business. He doesn't. I mean, how much more respect would I genuinely have for that man if he had said he'd go, and he even agreed to it at one point. What you do out here is your own business. I mean, I was pretty much ready to quit, potentially, as that conversation began. Until I then knew from him that you know, unless I phoned him saying you're invited to my house or do you want to meet somewhere for a conversation, that he was otherwise not to violate my privacy. But you know, if yeah, to know he was involved in, he has his research / correction interests, and he didn't even say I have the impression that you're gay. Is that true? He could have asked me that. He said be a good poof. Not so that was a double. But then to know if that's what he comes up with after, you know, he's applied his research method, and I know what it is I've done and not done in my personal life. And it's like I was thinking, well, I hope he's not actually concerned with researching. Yeah, I mean, if you can get something as basic as that, like basic details about a person's heart, completely wrong. You know, what other blunders is he capable of? And yeah, Gary's early on, Gary's words were "Don't reach out to us." I had to kind of try to interpret and discern what was meant initially by terms like that. What Roger may consider to be a reach, I don't think it's not a reach in any dictionary's definition of the term reach, or why we have the yellow pages so that they may be contacted. They have religious prejudice there, and yeah, it's really hard.